What if humanity could, like, evolve into something called a sunlight civilization?
A sunlight civilization.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds pretty out there, doesn't it? Like science fiction almost.
Totally. What does that even mean, practically speaking?
I guess it conjures up this image of a society that's just fundamentally different, maybe drawing energy or its core principles directly from light in a way we don't really grasp now. It's a strong visual.
It really is. And that's actually the really intriguing core of what we're diving into today. We got this fascinating set of source materials from one of you listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking like public comments from actual government meetings, detailed profiles, blog posts, talking about international outreach.
And even bits from recent podcasts, right?
Exactly. And it all centers on this system called the One Light System, OLS, and the vision its founder, who goes by Asvet Lotan, is putting forward.
Right. So our goal here in this deep dive is to take all these pieces, all these sources, and try to figure out what they're telling us about OLS.
Yeah, what is this system? How is it supposed to get humanity to this sunlight civilization?
And importantly, how are they actually trying to make it happen? You know, we see mentions of pushing it in education, using it for global peace.
We'll definitely explore the scope of all that, the specific actions they're taking, based purely on the materials provided.
So by the end of this chat, you should hopefully have a clear picture of this unique approach, its main ideas, its big goals, like a shortcut through all the docs.
Okay, so let's start with the person behind it all. The sources, the profile info we have, point to the founder and CEO of One Light System, OLS, being Nazar Pankiv.
But he uses the professional name Asvet Lotan.
Right, Asvet Lotan. And the materials say he was born in Ternopil, Ukraine.
And there's a history there, isn't there? The sources mention a background in environmental advocacy, even here in California.
Yeah, exactly. There are mentions of him making public comments way back in 2016, like at Sacramento City Council meetings, things like that.
Oh, interesting. So this focus on, like, community and betterment isn't entirely new.
It seems like a consistent theme.
Mm-hmm.
One source we looked at mentions a Sacramento meeting, May 2016, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't talking about OLS back then, not directly. It was more local stuff, water conservation, river access, but framed around community unity.
Which kind of sets the stage, maybe, for this later focus on collective well-being through OLS, that connection to improving things.
Seems like it. Okay, so let's get into the system itself, OLS, and this sunlight meditation. What do the sources say that actually is?
Well, the materials consistently paint OLS as this, let's call it a meditation education platform. It's pretty specific.
Okay.
Its main thing, its core principle, is about consciously receiving and crucially retaining direct light energy.
Light energy, like
Wow.
sunlight. Is it sun gazing?
It sounds a bit like that on the surface, yeah. But the sources are really careful to point out that OLS provides specific, structured, and importantly, safe techniques.
Okay, so structured and safe. More than just, staring at the sun. How is it structured?
They don't give us like a step-by-step guide in these particular sources, but they emphasize that the platform teaches the proper methods. Safety seems paramount.
Right.
The structure comes from these systems and tools OLS offers. And they mentioned an OLS meditation system. There's one called OLSM for groups, like collective illumination.
Collective.
Yeah. Interesting. And then OLSLM, which is geared towards personal practice.
And one thing that really jumped out at me from the sources was this concept of accumulating light minutes.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely unique.
Like, what is that about?
It's a metric, basically. The sources explain that OLS gives you tools to track these light minutes, and they frame them as, like, personal assets.
Assets, like currency.
Kind of, but for spiritual growth. It's a way to quantify your progress, your development. Very different from just, feeling more enlightened.
Yeah.
They even have a custom OLS calendar. The sources suggest it's for timing the practice precisely, maybe aligning with optimal light cycles or frequencies.
Light minutes as an asset.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a concrete idea for something spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Do the sources explain why they quantify it like that? Or what having, 10,000 light minutes does for you?
Well, they link accumulating these minutes directly to having a greater capacity to receive and hold on to light. And that, in turn, leads to personal transformation, spiritual growth.
Okay.
They don't give a scale like X minutes equals you can do this specific thing, but the emphasis is definitely on it being a measurable kind of internal wealth. It makes the whole process very systematic.
Right.
One source even showed Asvet Lotan's own numbers, over 19,931 light minutes as of whenever that source was dated. So the founder uses the system's metrics too.
Wow, okay. That precision really highlights the structured approach. Now, the sources also talk about taking this personal practice and applying it much more broadly, specifically pushing for it in schools.
Yeah, that's a major thread. We saw excerpts from a public comment Asvit Lotan gave to the California Department of Education, also back in May 2016.
What was he recommending?
He was talking about improving social life, communication, but then connected it to what he called inner technology, which seems to be his term for the meditation practice, and tying it to the environment, too.
And didn't he have a really specific point about lighting in schools?
Yes. That was interesting. He suggested, according to the sources, that assessments, like final tests, should ideally happen under natural light.
Natural light.
He argued closed windows and artificial light could be potentially harmful. He literally said schools should open shades because this is a natural light.
Okay, natural light is better. But how does sunlight meditation fit into the school day, according to their reasoning?
The rationale given in the sources is pretty deep OLS stuff. The idea is that doing this collective harvesting the sunlight early in the day helps everyone, students, teachers, get updated to the most current light information frequency.
Updated, like software.
Kind of, yeah. The belief presented is that this alignment is really important for enabling development in ways we maybe don't fully get yet.
And he'd been working on this for a while, even back then.
In that 2016 comment, he mentioned he'd already been developing it for 5 years and had materials ready.
And the sources show he kept bringing this up, right? Giving public comments on it multiple times since.
Absolutely. It shows real persistence, trying to get educational authorities to consider it. It's clearly a core belief for him that this isn't just personal, it's fundamental for collective growth, starting with kids.
Okay, so taking that idea, inner development, affecting the collective, and zooming out even further, the sources connect sunlight meditation directly to global peace.
Explicitly, yeah. There's one source. It's labeled as an excerpt from a podcast script, OLS 2974. It makes that link crystal clear.
How so?
It frames the practice as a way to actually foster global peace, to unite humanity, and it doesn't shy away from the harsh reality. It mentions ongoing conflicts, specifically the war in Ukraine, and talks about the suffering, the deaths, the displacement since 2022. Very current context.
So the big question then is, how can a meditation practice, according to OLS and these sources, possibly offer a solution to something like a brutal war?
The OLS perspective, as laid out in the sources, is that these conflicts ultimately come from deep human divisions, from fear, from disconnection from each other, and from some kind of universal harmony.
Okay.
And sunlight meditation is positioned as the antidote. By aligning people with this universal light, this harmony, it's believed to cultivate an inner state compassion, understanding that naturally leads to a collective desire for peace.
So it's that classic idea. Change starts within. External conflict reflects internal states.
Exactly. That's the core argument in the sources. Peace begins inside. And connecting back to schools.
Right.
Teaching it early is seen as planting seeds for a future generation that values cooperation over conflict. That OLS 2974 source also mentions a 2022 document, Statement 1857, calling for humanity to unite through this practice to heal the world.
Wow. And this isn't just talk, is it? The sources show they're actively trying to get this message out there globally, like real outreach efforts.
Oh, definitely. It's not theoretical for them. The materials lay out a very clear strategy of contacting influential leaders, governments all over the world.
And it says Asvit Lotan is open to talking integration with anyone who shares that peace vision.
Explicitly stated, anyone who sees potential in the system.
And the list of who they've contacted, according to the sources, it's pretty extensive. It really shows that global ambition. Should we run through some examples?
Yeah, let's do that. The sources detail contacting the Ukrainian government multiple times.
Which makes sense, given Asvit Lotan is from Ukraine.
Right. The material calls it offering Ukraine a hand into light, basically, a chance to integrate sunlight meditation into their systems, especially now during the war.
And there was a specific web page mentioned.
Yeah, a Ukrainian language page. Let me find the reference. It's on ols-med.net. It details these recommendations.
And didn't that page also mention letters sent elsewhere?
That's the striking part, yes. That same source confirms letters outlining these recommendations were also sent multiple times to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Wow. So reaching out to leaders on both sides of an active conflict, offering this system as a path to peace.
That's what the source material indicates, yes. Presenting it as a way towards understanding, even in the absolute worst circumstances.
Okay, beyond that specific, intense situation, where else has this outreach gone.
It's genuinely global. The sources document contact with the government of Taiwan in November 2023. There's a blog post link provided for that.
Okay, Taiwan. Who else?
Then the French government in March 2024. Again, a blog post linked referencing a letter sent to the president of France. Following that, outreach to the German government in August 2024. Another blog post link provided as the source for that.
Germany. Got it.
And most recently, according to the sources, the U.S. government was contacted in January 2025. There's a link referencing the delivery of materials for that, too.
Okay, so Ukraine, Russia, Taiwan, France, Germany, the U.S. That's a significant list of major world players they've actively contacted.
It really is, and the sources give a little insight into how they choose who to contact. It's not random.
How do they decide?
It involves identifying leaders, officials, who actually have the influence and authority to make systemic changes happen.
So looking for people in government education ministries, maybe international bodies who could potentially implement something like this.
Exactly. The sources mention they analyze leaders' public statements, look for signs of openness to, innovative ideas like large-scale meditation implementation.
So for Ukraine, for example, they targeted specific officials who might be able to integrate these ideas, even with the war going on.
That's the implication in the material, yes. A very targeted, systematic approach. It shows they're serious about aiming for broad societal integration, not just individual practice. They want to influence policy.
And for people who want to learn more, go deeper into all this, there's a podcast series mentioned.
Yes, the sources point to a recent OLS podcast series as a key resource. That OLS 2974 source we mentioned actually points to OLS 2973 as the place to find it.
Where is it available?
The link provided in the sources is olsme.com, subdate sols 2902973.
Okay, and what does that series cover?
It's described as covering the practical steps for the meditation itself, plus updates on all these global outreach efforts we've been talking about.
So it connects the practice to the mission.
Yeah, explicitly tying it back to that big goal mentioned in OLS 2974. Helping humanity reach that sunlight civilization.
So if concepts like light minutes or meditation in schools or this global outreach caught your interest, that podcast series is where OLS directs you for more details.
Straight from the source, yeah.
Okay, so wrapping this up, this deep dive, based on the listener-provided sources, has really given us a detailed look into the One Light system, its founder, Asvet Lotan, as our Punkiv, and this huge vision.
We've seen OLS presented as this very structured system, sunlight meditation, accumulating light energy, these light minutes as internal assets.
We looked at the specific push to get it into schools, not just for kids' well-being, but seen as vital for updating collective consciousness, connecting with light frequencies, enabling development. And then that powerful link they draw between the inner practice and the massive goal of global peace, framing it as the antidote to division and conflict.
With those documented efforts to reach out to world leaders, even in conflict zones, offering this as a potential path forward.
So why does digging into all this matter for you listening right now?
Well, I think it offers a really, really unique perspective. It's looking at huge global problems and personal development and suggesting an internal, almost energetic solution. That's pretty different from how we usually approach things.
Definitely. And it also just highlights the power of one person's or one group's deep conviction. You see the belief, and then you see the persistent, documented global action taken to pursue that vision. It's audacious, really.
Audacious is a good word for it. That's systematic outreach, aiming for policy change worldwide.
So it leaves us with this final thought, maybe. The sources talk about accumulating light minutes as assets, aiming for a sunlight civilization.
Yep.
It makes you wonder, what would a civilization actually look like if its core value, its measure of progress, wasn't material wealth or tech, but the collective internal light energy of its people?
Right. How fundamentally different would that society be from ours, which is so focused on external things, material resources? It really challenges how we think about value and progress, doesn't it? Something to chew on.